Mental Ray 3.5 introduces a new sun and sky system. It's a set of features working together to quickly and easily recreate a realistic daylight for exterior and also interior renderings with light coming from windows or glass walls. If your preferred renderer is Mental Ray, make sure you set the Vs to design these Mental Ray defaults, so some steps when using these features will be automated. In this scene, we have a building with realistic materials already assigned. These are the new architecture and design materials that are also a new feature of Mental Ray 3.5 and that we will describe in a separate video. There are no light in the scene, so if we render it, we will get default lights and the result is far from a realistic result. Let's set up a daylight system. We can create it anywhere. The dialog that appears asks if you want to create an environment sky map too, and we say yes. This will automatically add an environment map for the sky that will work in combination with a new daylight system. We set the distance and then align the compass to the north direction indicated by the arrow. Check the line orientation option and it's done. Select the daylight again and you can set location, date and time in the motion panel. Let's do San Francisco, March 21st at noon. Back to the modify panel, we see that the sun and sky are the new Mental Ray ones. If we didn't set the default switcher to Mental Ray, we would have had to change them manually, and the dialog asking to create environment map for the sky would have appeared only when we selected the Mental Ray sky from this list. And let's look at the sky map. If you open the rendering environment dialog, you see it called Mental Ray physical sky. This is the third piece after the sun and sky lights that makes the new Mental Ray 3.5 daylight system so realistic. Lights are set up. Before rendering, let's make sure the logarithmic exposure control is selected and enabled and that the exterior daylight is on. Sun and sky are high dynamic range lights and the exposure control is necessary. Also, we want to tweak the exposure control so that rendering looks more like a bright sunny day. Brightness up to 80 and contrast to 75. Final step, in the render dialog, in direct illumination tab, let's enable final gather and let's use the draft preset. It will be more than enough. And we're ready for the first rendering. And this low quality rendering you see is the final gather process. It gives you a preview of what the rendering will look like, so you have a chance to stop it very early if something is wrong, saving quite some time. Here's the finished rendering, a perfect daylight recreated with minimum effort. In the background you see the environment physical sky map with a light haze on the horizon and then blue above as you would expect at noon. Below the horizon the sky map used gray as a ground color. But let's look what else this new daylight system can do. For example, let's change point of view and look at the house shadow. Shadows look a lot more realistic when the sky and sky map are used. They have a nice gradient and also get a bluish color from the sky. And let's go back to the original point of view and look at some more options. With the daylight system selected in the modify panel, we can access the parameters for the sun and the sky. The parameters for the sky map instead can be accessed from the material editor. With the material editor and the environment dialog open, drag the Mental Ray physical sky map into an empty slot as an instance. And now the physical sky parameters can be edited, and notice that both the sky map and the sun parameters have this inherit from Mental Ray sky option enabled. Since these three parts work together, by default they share the same settings, and the sky settings in the modify panel are the ones that everybody uses, so you have to adjust them only in one place. Of course, if you need to tweak them individually, you can simply disable the option and change them as desired. The sky parameter let you adjust the color of the ground, for example turning it to green, and also change the height and the blur of the horizon line. For example, let's try height 1 and blur 2. Night color is the color of the sky during the night hours. It will change automatically. A bit more about this in a minute. Red-blue tint lets you shift the normal blue sky toward a more red one with saturation instead. Lets you make the sky more gray by lowering the value or oversaturate it to a very strong solid blue, useful for example for non-photorealistic renderings. And let's try another rendering and check these new settings. The ground part of the sky map is now green, and the horizon line is higher and much more blurred, looking more like a distant line and less distracting. And some of the green line from the ground can also be seen on the building. All the components, sun, sky and sky map, are automatically adjusted depending on the time of the day. This is the strongest feature of this daylight system. Let's try, for example, to change the time to evening, like 5 p.m. and render again. And it does look like evening. The sun is less intense, it's more red, there's more haze on the horizon, darker sky and a darker ground. If you animate the time of the day to go from morning to evening, you will have all the light and color automatically adjusted, and all you did was to animate a single parameter. Let's change point of view to another camera. There's one more thing to see, but to see it better we also lower the logarithmic exposure control settings back to default values. Brightness 65, contrast 50, and render. Here we see that the physical sky map also recreates the disk of the sun and the glow around it. If we go to the material editor and look at the physical sky setting, we can change how the sun looks like. By default, the disk is 4 times bigger than what would be in real life. This just to make it more visible. You can make it bigger for more dramatic sunset or set it to 1 if you need absolute realism. The other parameters let you set the intensity of the disk and the glow. There is one final parameter we want to show, haze, but to do that we change to another scene. In this city scene we have already set up a daylight system and animated it. Let's go to frame 100, which is a mid-morning setting. In the modify panel, in the mental ray sky parameters, we have haze currently set to 0. So before we change anything, let's have a look at how the current scene renders. So here we can see that it looks like a pretty bright and sunny day, blue sky, high contrast shadows, definitely not what we expect for a morning setting. Let's make a copy of this image for reference and try adding some haze. We start with a value of 2 just to test the effect. And let's render again. Let's look at the two images side by side. We can see how the sky is now not as blue as before and how the shadows now are softer. The whole image looks a little bit softer, so we are heading in the right direction. Let's make another copy and try a haze value of 5. Definitely looking better. The shadow looks really softer, like an overcast day. The sky is not that blue anymore, and the whole image has a yellowish tint. But there's still something missing. If the air is not clear, we would expect to see the objects that are farther away not as clearly as the objects in the foreground. This is where visibility distance comes into play. This is the distance where the haze is 10% visible. By default, it's a very big number, probably beyond the limit of this scene. If we bring it down to a smaller value, like for example 1000, we should be able to see its effect. Let's keep once again the last rendering and do a final test. And here we finally get a nice depth effect. The buildings in the back are less visible while the foreground trees are still sharp. This is a good example of a hazy morning setting, and as you saw, you can create and control it very easily with just two simple parameters.